faced by the American judicial system. I'm joined now by Hilary Shelton. He is the director of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People here in Washington, D.C., the NAACP. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be with you.
Happening right now, we're seeing all these protests, these die-ins in major cities across the United States, investigations, but how long will it take before we actually see some sort of change in the judicial system, which seems to favor police officers nationwide? What will it take?
It's going to be changing the law. Quite frankly, it's great to see the protesters out there. One of the things you should look for when we're looking at the protesters is that they are very racially diverse. They're white, they're black, they're Asian, they're Hispanic, and otherwise. It's good to see that all these Americans are concerned about what's happening. This specifically hurts African Americans in this particular case, but they see hurts all of us. To change this, we got to change the law. As we talk about the grand jury system, it was great to see Al Sharpton talking about the problems there. We have to make sure that when police officers come up for criminal charges, that we bring in a special prosecutor. If you leave the same prosecutor in place that's always there, that prosecutor is dependent on those same police officers to be able to make their cases. So a special prosecutor should be brought in from outside that would have less bias than the problems we had in Ferguson.
And we're taking a live look right now at a protest currently taking place on the streets of Chicago. You mentioned the wide variety of people on the streets protesting. For our international audience, can you talk about the state of race relations in the United States? Is it a white-black issue, or is it more so white police officers versus African Americans?
Well, it's a little bit more complex even than that. What we have is a system that actually gives major problems to African Americans. Quite frankly, we've seen cases where even African American police officers use too much force in many cases because that's the way they were trained. That was the expectation, and of course that was the result. So we have to change the system itself so we can eliminate that bias as well. There's also an irrational fear of African Americans that is still very much with us. It shows up as you actually listen to the officer that shot Michael Brown. He talks about how he looked at Michael Brown and saw a demon, and did very well that he was afraid for his life, even though he was talking about someone who was the same height and size that he is, that was not armed. Officer Wilson was armed to the teeth. So it was an irrational fear for him to actually say that he feared for his life under those particular circumstances.
Do you think that was also the same case in the case of Eric Garner? He's a larger guy, but he was surrounded by several police officers. If you had the same size gentleman, a white gentleman of Eric Garner's size, do you think there would have been the same reaction?
No, I don't think so. And quite frankly, they would have probably stopped when he said, "I can't breathe." He said it several times. So in essence, when you've got 5 well-armed police officers standing around a very large African-American man who they know cannot run very fast, and they asked them to stop, all 5 of them could have stopped, backed up, and given him a moment to collect themselves and then completed the arrest. But that's not what they did, and I believe race did play a major role in that decision as well.
There was video in the Garner case. We've all seen it played over numerous times. Still no indictment there. Do you think that weakens the argument for body cameras, for police body cameras? What do you think the solution should be here? Again, we're taking a live look at Chicago, but if you could, I could get your thoughts on that.
Well, body cameras will be very, very helpful. Even though in the Garner case, you'd wonder, even after watching that video, how the grand jury could have come out with any other decision. But indeed they did. So we need the body cameras, we need pistol cameras. We also need dash cameras, and we need taser cameras. We've had a problem with those tools being utilized in an abusive manner as well. We need those, but we also need to change the law. Changing just the equipment they use is not going to do it. We have to change the law and make it illegal for police officers to utilize racial profiling. We have to actually adjust the issue, what kind of force can be used under which circumstances to actually arrest a suspect. Keep in mind, in the United States of America, even on this day, after watching that video, we know that you're still supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. You're nothing more than a suspect at that point. But what we're saying is the use of deadly force too often, and most often, against racial and ethnic minorities and African Americans very specifically, is accepted as long as the police officer says, "I felt threatened." At some point, we've got to ask the question, is it rational for a Darren Wilson to say that he feared for his life from an African American unarmed 18-year-old college-bound youth, and he was armed to the teeth? I would say that was irrational. So we're going to have to change the whole program and the paradigm in which we address our criminal justice system.
We're taking a live look again at Chicago of people gathering there on the streets. So we were looking at New York City from above a few moments ago. What goes through your mind when you look at these protests across the country? You know, there's also a march being planned for December 13th in Washington, D.C. Do you think what we're seeing now is enough to get the attention the highest reaches of government here in the United States, enough to make that major overhaul of what you're talking about?
No, absolutely. As a matter of fact, it's wonderful to see so many American people turning out like this in a democratic system of governance. Your question is, will it be heard in the highest levels of government? It absolutely is. I've been on several phone calls with the Attorney General, several phone calls with the President of the United States. They are hearing what's going on, and programs and initiatives are being launched even as we sit here to try to change that paradigm.
All right, Hilary Shelton will continue to watch the situation that is taking place across the United States. Thank you so much for your perspective.
It's great to be here.